Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This video consists of the biography of a famous writer, Ruskin Bond. Life history. Ruskin Bond was born on 19th May 1934 in Kasali, Punjab, State Agency, British India. He was an Indian author, poet. He completed his studies in Bishop Cotton School. His notable works are Trees Still Grow in Dhairya, A Flight of Pigeon, The Blue Umbrella. Ruskin Bond is an Indian author of British descent. He lives with his adopted family in Nanda, Missouri, India. The Indian Council for Child Education has recognized his role in the growth of children's literature in India. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in 1992 for Our Trees Still Grow in Dhairya, his novel in English. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 1999 and Padma Bhushan in 2014. Life and career. Ruskin Bond was born to Edith Carl and Abraham Alexander Bond in Kasali, Punjab, State Agency, British India. Ruskin's father joined the Royal Air Force in 1939, and Ruskin, along with his mother and sister, went to live at his maternal home at Dehradun. Shortly after that, he was sent to boarding school in Missouri. When Bond was 8 years old, his mother separated from his father and married to a Punjabi Hindu, Hari. His father arranged for Ruskin to be brought to New Delhi where he was posted. He was very close to his father and describes this period with his father as one of the happiest times of his life. When he was 10, his father died of malaria while he was posted in Calcutta. Ruskin was at his boarding school in Shimla and was informed about this tragedy by his teacher. He was thoroughly heartbroken. Later, he was raised by his mother and stepfather who lived in Dehradun. He did his schooling from Bishop Cotton School in Shimla, from where he graduated in 1950. He won several writing competitions in school, including the Irwin Divinity Prize and the Halley Literature Prize. He wrote one of the first short stories, Untouchable, at the age of 16 in 1951. Following his high school education, he went to his aunt's home in Channel Island, UK in 1951 for his better prospectus and stayed there for 2 years. In London, he started writing his first novel, Room on the Roof, the semi-autobiography story of the orphaned Anglo-Indian boy named Rusty. He was various jobs for his living. It won the John Leavenworth Prize 1957, awarded to the British Commonwealth writer under 30. He moved to London and worked in a photo studio while searching for a publisher. After getting published, Bond used the advance money to pay the sea passage to Mumbai and settle in Dehradun. He worked for a few years freelancing from Delhi and Dehradun. He sustained himself financially by writing short stories and poems for newspapers and magazines. On his youth, he said, "Sometimes I got lucky, and some work got selected, and I earned a few hundred rupees. Since I was in my 20s and didn't have any responsibility, I was just happy to be doing what I loved doing best." In 1963, he went to live in Missouri because, besides liking the place, it was close to the editor and publishers in Delhi. He edited a magazine for 4 years. In 1980, Penguin set up in India and approached him to write some books. He had written Vagrants and Valleys in 1956 as a squirrel to the room on the roof. These two novels were published into one volume by Penguin India in 1993. The following years, a collection of his non-fiction writing, The Best of Ruskin Bond, was published by Penguin India. His interest in supernatural fiction led him to write popular titles such as Ghost Stories from the Raj, Seasons of the Ghost, and Face in the Dark and Other Haunting. Since then, he has written over 500 short stories, essays, and novels, including The Blue Umbrella, Funny Side Up, A Flight of Pigeon, and more than 50 books of children. So, he has also published his autobiography, Scenes from a Writer's Life, describe his formative years growing up in Anglo-India, and a further autobiography, Lone Fox Dancing, was published in 2017. The Lamp is Lit is a collection of essays and episodes from his journal. Since 1963, he has lived as a freelance writer in Mussoorie, a town in Himalayan foothills in Uttarakhand, where he lives with his adopted family Lander. Massourie's cottage, which has been his home since 1980. Asked what he liked the most about his life, he said that I have been able to write for so long. I started at the age of 17 or 18 and I am still writing. If I were not a professional writer who was getting published, I would still write. In his essay on being an Indian, he explains his Indian identity. Race did not make me one. Religion did not make me one, but history did. And in the long run, it's history that counts. His sister Ellen lived in Ludhiana with his stepsister until she died in 2014. He also has a brother, William, who lives in Canada. Literary style. Most of his works are influenced by life in the hill stations or at the foothills of Himalayas, where he spent his childhood. His first novel, Room on the Roof, was written when he was 17 and published when he was 21. It was partly based on his experiences at Dehradun in a small rented room on the roof and his friends. His earlier works were written without it being meant for any particular readership. His first children's book, Angry River, published in 1970, had its written toned down on a publisher's request for the children's story. On writing for children, he said, I had a pretty lonely childhood and it helped me to understand the child better. Bond's work reflected his Anglo-Indian experiences and the changing political, social, cultural aspects of India, having been through colonial and post-colonial and post-independence phases of India. Bond said that while his autobiographical work Rain in the Mountain was about his years spent in Mussoorie, Scenes from a Writer's Life described his first 21 years. Scene from a Writer's Life focuses on Bond's trip to England, his struggle to find a publisher for his first book, The Room on the Roof, and his yearning to come back to India, particularly to Doon. It also tells a lot about my parents, said Bond. The book ends with the publication of my first novel and my decision to make writing my livelihood, Bond said, adding, Basically, it describes how I became a writer. Being a writer for over 50 years, Bond experimented with different genres. Early works included fiction, stories, novella, with some being autobiographical. Later, he tried out non-fictional romance and books for books. Children, he said his favorite genre are essay and short stories. He considers himself a visual writer because for short stories he first imagines it like a film and then notes it down. For an essay or a travelogue, such planning is not needed for him. He feels that unaccepted there makes it more exciting. Born like Just William by Richard Crompton, Billy Monter by Charles Hamilton, and classics such as Alice in Wonderland and works by Charles Dickens and Mark Twain. Filmography. In 1978, Bollywood film Junoon is based on Bond's historical novel A Fight of Pigeons about an episode during the Indian Rebellion in 1957. It was produced by Shashi Kapoor and directed by Shyam Benegal. The Rusty stories have been adapted into the Doordarshan TV serials Ek Tha Rusty. Several stories have been incorporated in the school curriculum in India, including The Night Train at Deoli, Time Stops at Shimla, and A Tree Still Growing Dhairya. In 2005, the Bollywood director Vishal Bharadwaj made a film based on his po- po- popular novel for children, The Blue Umbrella. The movie won the National Award for Best Children's Film. Ruskin Bond made his maiden big scene appearance with cameo in Vishal Bharadwaj's film Khoon Maaf in 2011, based on his short stories Sunana's Seven Husbands. Bond appears as a bishop in the movie with Priyanka Chopra playing the title role. Bond has earlier collaborated with Bharadwaj in The Blue Umbrella, which was also based on one of his works. Awards received by Ruskin Bond. John Llewellyn Rhys Prize in 1957, Sahitya Academy Awards in 1992, Padma Shri in 1999, Padma Bhushan in 2014. Rusty. Rusty is a popular fictional character created by Ruskin Bond. Rusty is a 16-year-old Anglo-Indian boy living in Dehradun. He is orphaned and has no real family. He starts living with his guardian, Mr. John Harrison, who is stern and harsh in his manners. Rusty is obliged to follow the orders and rules of his guardian and dares not disobey him. He feels helpless because he knew that if he disobeys Mr. John, he will get gagged. He doesn't have any real friend and he finds himself very lonely in his guardian's house. He lives in European part of the Dehradun but wants to embrace India culture and lifestyle. He makes friends with some Indian boys in the local marketplace. He hides the fact from Mr. John, continues to go on secret adventures with him. Very soon he decided to run away from the captivity of Mr. John and go back to England. Rusty's character offers a teenager's perspective who's battling with his about his life, relationship, happiness, and love. Inspiration for the character. Rusty was created by Ruskin Bond to write stories about his own past. His first book, Gnome on the Roof, which was wrote at the age of 17 and was a semi-autobiography story with Rusty being a protagonist. It was based on his friends and the time he spent in the rented room when he was in Dehradun. Most of the Rusty's initial year was set in the location of Dehradun, a scenic place in northern India. Ruskin Bond was deeply attached to Dhairya, and most of his stories were inspired in the hills and the valleys of this region. Novels and short stories featuring Rusty. Room on the Roof, Vagrant in the Valley, Rusty the Boy from the Hill, Rusty Ran Away, Rusty and the Magical Mountain, Rusty Goes to London, Rusty Coming Home, The Adventures of Rusty. Bibliography. Stories, books written by Ruskin Bond. White Mice, A Prospectus of Flower, Garlands of Memory, Frogs in the Mountain, Ghost Stories from the Raj, Finally Side Up, Rain in the Mountains, Snow from the Himalayas, A Tree Still Grow in Dehra, Dust in the Mountains, A Season of Ghosts, Tiger Forever, A Town Called Dehra, At School with Ruskin Bond, An Island of Trees, The Night Train at Deoli and Other Stories, The Face in the Dark and Other Haunting Potpourri, The Adventures of Rusty, Crazy Times with Uncle Ken, The Death of Trees, Tales and Legends from India, Time Stops at Shimli, A Tiger in the House, Four Feathers, School Days, Hanuman to the Rescue, Ranji's Wonderful Bat, The Tiger in the Tunnel, The Hidden Pool, Mr. Oliver's Diary, The Parrot Who Wouldn't Talk, The Ruskin Bond Children's Opinions, Rusty the Boy from the Hills, The Monkey Trouble, Ruskin Bond's Book of Nature, Tiger for Dinner, The Rupa Book of Haunted Horses, The Very Best of Ruskin Bond, The Rupa Book of Airy Stories, The Rupa Book of the Ruskin Bond's Himalayan Tales, The Penguin Book of Indian Ghost Stories, and Penguin Book of Indian Railway Stories, Faces in the Dark and Other Haunting Stories, Collect Friends in the Small Places, Ruskin Bond's Forgettable Place, A Crow for All the Seasons, Hip Hop Nature Boy, Another Poem, A Book of Simply Living, Love Among the Bookshelves, The Eye of the Eagle, Kite Maker, Henry the Chameleon, Great Stories for Children, Panther Moons and Other Stories, Rusty and the Leopard, The Little Book of Life, The Little Book of Happiness, The Handful of Nuts, The Last Truck Ride, Falling in Love Again, No Man in an Island, Uncle, Aunt and Elephant with Love from the Hill, The Room on the Roof, Vagrant in the Valley, Scene from the Writer's Life, Rusty Ran Away, A Penguin of Pigeon, Flight of Pigeon, The Labor Day, The Senus West, The Road to the Bazaar, The Panther's Moon, Once Upon a Monsoon Time, The India I Love, The Kashmir Storyteller, Delhi is Not Far, Animal Stories, Funny Side, The Road to Missouri, Strangers in the Night, All Roads Led to Ganga, Angry River, Tales of Fostergunj, Maharani, Secret, Leopard on the Mountain, Grandfather's Private Zoo, The Blue Umbrella, Too Much Trouble, When the Tiger Was King, Art Tree Still Grow in Dehra, Memories of Hills and Dales, Once You Have Lived with Mountains, The Cherry Tree, The Ranji Wonderful Bat, A Girl's Story. Thank you, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel.